men and women are allowed to pray here. Typically, though, due to the size of this facility, we have the men pray here in larger congregations, and then the women pray up in the mezzanine upstairs, which we'll show you later on tonight. And we also have the multi-purpose room, which we were all eating in as a place for overflow as well. We have 5 daily prayers here every single day. And the first one being before sunrise. So that's like, let's say before 6:30-ish. Right now it's at 5:45. And you'll see about 40 people on average every morning come in here at that time, which is pretty amazing. The people leave their houses, they come and worship, and then they go on with their work or school, whatever it is, for the rest of the day. Then we also have the second prayer of the day, which is around noon. It takes place at 1:15 here. It's the Dhuhr prayer. And then you have Asr, which is the afternoon prayer, which we pray around 5 o'clock. And then you'll see one probably closer to the end of our session tonight, which is the sunset prayer, Maghrib. And then we have one at night called Isha. So there's 5 prayers. All 5 prayers are offered in the masjid, but it's not mandatory for Muslims to come here and pray every single prayer. They can pray at their work and school, whatever they may be. But it's just more rewarding and more spiritually uplifting when they do come here. So you'll find people here throughout the day. The obligatory prayer is on Friday, which is referred to as Jumu'ah, and the place packed to full capacity, even beyond. Here and the hallway behind you, multi-purpose hall upstairs, you name it. So if you want to see a huge crowd, then come on Friday at 1:15, and this place will be absolutely loaded. We'll give you a more formal tour about the masjid and intros and so forth in a little bit. I just thought I'd give you a quick opening on the masjid itself and what goes on here and so forth. There's plenty more activities that take place, which we'll try to talk about in a little bit. But at this point, I guess I'll hand the mic over to your professor. Go ahead. Sure.
Welcome to this year's Muslim Media event. I'd like to thank the Islamic Center of the Inland Empire for giving us a space to talk about such topics and allowing for discussion to happen. I would like to start off by introducing our guests. Over here on the left, we have Ryan Falcioni, Professor of Philosophy, Nadim Riaz, Social Activist, Saib Ashrafi, Islamic Scholar, Dr. Naveen Bahari, Educator, Masood Khan, Attorney. He'll be coming in shortly. And my name is Emmanuel Vargas. I will be your guys' moderator for this year. I would like to start off by giving a moment of silence to the Christchurch and the New Zealand shooting that happened. Let's go ahead and give a minute or two of silence and pay our dues. I would also like to thank Michelle Dowd, Professor of Journalism, for putting this event, helping gather people and creating a place for discussion. I would like to start off with a bit of factoids. Worldwide, there's over 1 billion people who adhere to the Muslim faith. That is estimated between 7 and 8 billion people on this earth, which is a very sizable number. During the 18 and 1900s, 1/5 of the slaves that were transported over here were Islamic. And then tying that into Orientalism, which is the root of Islamophobia, The term Orientalism originally referred to the study by Western scholars of the peoples and societies of the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. It developed in the context of and served to justify European colonialism in those regions. That was some time ago. It wasn't until the 1990s where we actually incorporated studies of the Islamic faith. So therefore, you see a very wide gap of misunderstanding and, some bigotry. I would like to go ahead and start off with the questions and direct this one to Dr. Naveen. What steps do we need to take to incorporate the studies of the Islamic faith in a higher education system?
Wow. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening, I guess, or good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate having you and look forward to your questions. That's actually a big topic. We have more than ever, it's interesting, I know Notre Dame, which is a very predominant or prominent Catholic institution, started a Department of Islamic Studies several years ago, which is, speaks to how far we've come, not only as a country, but also educationally. Most large institutions today will have either a department or actually even a chair of Islamic studies. And I think more and more now we're, like this is a great example here of what we see at Chaffee, where, Professor Falcone, Professor Dowd are incorporating not only other different religions, but they're incorporating Islam as one of the three largest monotheistic religions as part of their curriculum. So what can we do? There's a lot that can be done, but I also think there's a lot that's being done right now. And awareness and understanding and breaking the misconceptions. So it takes everyone learning to kind of break those barriers where it's no longer such a stereotypical bad word to say that you're a Muslim. So, don't know if I answered.
And I'd like to slide the same question over to Nadim Riaz in a more social activist standpoint. What steps do we need to take to incorporate not just the higher education people who can achieve an education, but just the everyday masses?
So yeah, kind of just to elaborate on what she said. Again, just like we all go to Chaffee College, right? We all go to school where we're constantly seeking to educate ourselves in every aspect of life. Likewise, I think it's equally important from a social standpoint for us to basically, and I think the best way to learn about Islam is to talk to a Muslim, right? More than likely there's somebody in your classroom who is a Muslim, yet it's kind of there's this social stigma between religion, right? Can we talk about it? What can I say? What can I not say? But me being a Muslim, I was born Muslim, I've been practicing for 28 years, I learned a lot about my own religion from this guy right here, right? So I took his class, Monotheistic Religions, way back in the day, and now I'm actually teaching at Chaffee College as well in the business department. So again, my suggestion is just to learn firsthand from Muslims what Islam is all about, right? When we resort to looking at these mediums on television that have these certain biases, we're more than likely going to get pushed in a direction that's not always objective. So meet a Muslim, be polite, and I feel like you'll learn a lot.
And that's very interesting because in the media, while 80% of the domestic terrorism subjects are identified as Muslim in national news, FBI actually reports only 6% of the terrorism suspects are Muslim. 80% of ABC and CBS and 60% of Fox coverage of Muslims is negative, right? So, next question is directed to Falcione, professor of philosophy. How do the principles of the Quran conflict with the ideals of capitalism?
Wow. Time for a new dissertation. How do they conflict? I'm not certain they do. I think there are certain maybe practices in capitalism that could conflict, right? So for example, usury, right, or charging interest on loans, or certain aspects of business dealing. I think, actually Nadim and I were talking about this, Sharia law covers all areas of economic enterprise, and so I think it would put a lot of strictures on the kinds of things that could be done, the more exploitative practices and that sort of thing. But there's nothing wrong in principle with owning property. In fact, a lot of Sharia deals with, right, the property you have and how to use it. But I think the prohibitions against exploitation, against usury, against using your capital, and those are both in the Quran and in Sharia. So actually, Sahib would probably have more to say about some of the specifics. But yeah, so I think it puts limits and strictures. That said, I think those can be there from most any tradition. I mean, I was just talking to my class last week. We were doing the life of Jesus, and one of them even said that. I was talking about how, you know, Jesus says a lot about money and mostly don't have it. He says you can't serve both God and wealth. You can't serve both God and mammon. As a condition for following him, you must give up your possessions, right? And in the case of the apostles, it was shared in an apostles' fund and given to the poor. It says given to each according to their need. And so someone said, it sounds like Jesus was a communist, you know? And I was like, well, maybe, but I think the irony is that that's, to them, seems so foreign. Almost like we all know Jesus is a, you know, gun-toting American capitalist or something. And so pushing back, I think, against the abuses of capitalism and classism that come with that, I think can be, the resources for those critiques can be found in the Bible and the Quran and in Sharia, for sure.
And Saeed, would you like to chime in? He did mention you might have a little bit more explicit.
There are a lot of specific laws, I guess.
Yeah, no, I thought actually Ryan answered it excellently. As he mentioned, there's many aspects of capitalism that Islam has really no problem with. There was actually people during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that actually flourished financially. In fact, a few of his companions were known to be the richest in the community, and they were the ones that actually funded many of the expeditions or expansions of the community, buildings and so forth. And without them, without their generosity, none of that would have happened. So the same way today we have people in society that flourish financially just due to their, you know, business expertise and whatever it may be. But there's nothing wrong with that. He did mention usury. Yes, that in Islam, you know, is considered something prohibitive. We try to avoid indulging in interest, you know, whether it's a car, house, whatever the case may be. In an ideal Islamic situation, you wouldn't, you know, indulge in that. Of course, due to people's situations here and you know, the difficulty of you know, getting into a home or car, sometimes you may find Muslims that do that, but it's more, you know, due to their specific circumstances and so forth and difficulties that they're going through. In regards to other aspects of capitalism, he also mentioned exploitation. Of course, you know, we don't want that to happen whatsoever, where you know, monopolies take place and people are exploited and basically there's injustice in the whole financial system. That should not happen. There is no socialism, though, meaning there is nothing in Islam that says everyone needs to be equal. In fact, that's impossible because one of the pillars of Islam is zakah, charity. So every Muslim that has a particular amount of money, a minimum amount, which is called a nisab, is required to give charity every single year on their savings. So if everyone had savings, then who would you give the charity to? There will always be you know, poor people, and there will always be rich people, and this is just the way, you know, society goes. But charity is highly encouraged in Islam, that we take care of those that are less fortunate than us, always remember those that are less fortunate. And there's also a prophetic saying that it's due to the blessings of the poor that you get what you get your sustenance. So charity is highly emphasized, and you know, if charity goes around, then society is taken care of. There was actually one time in Islamic history where the financial system flourished so much that there was actually no one to receive that charity. That this happened under the leadership of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, which was probably over about 1,000 years ago. But it was an amazing time at that time where everyone was actually successful financially, and there was actually no one to even receive the charity at that time, meaning everyone had a decent amount of savings where they could not even accept that charity. But there's a lot more to talk about in regards to this topic, but I thought actually Ryan summarized it very well.
Thank you so much. How do we educate and dissolve the stereotypes that are portrayed by the mass media and reiterated by the mass? So an example would be recently one of the Ukaipa mayors put out an anti-Semitic response, right? So if we're having this in a local level, considering that media influences us a lot, and the fact that we didn't put forth studies till the 1990s on the Islamic faith, how do we combat it? I would like to direct the question to Nadim Riaz.
So again, I mean, there's a lot of ways to combat it. I mean, one of the great ways is to have, for example, there are organizations that we have that need to respond to it with the facts, right? So social media, right, First Amendment right, you can say whatever you want, but then it's very important to make sure that what you're hearing, again, look at the source of where it's coming from, right? To make sure, again, there's no biases, there's no political agenda. So for example, if you're hearing something that's being stated about Islam from someone who might not even be of the faith, we should question that, right? We're all, you know, intellectuals, we study, we ask questions, and that's something that Islam encourages even us to do, right? Where if something is not clear, we question it. We read, we study, and we make sure we firmly attest to it based on our research. So I think my suggestion would be to look into it, right? If it doesn't make sense, you know, find out, further research into it, and talk to a Muslim, right?
Anybody else would like to answer that question?
I'll make mine brief, but I have a lot to say here. I'm sure we all do, but I mean, and Nadeem mentioned it earlier. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as getting to know your local Muslims, right? I think sometimes those stereotypes are shattered through the truth of your experience. And so when someone says all Muslims are X or Muslims are seen to be X, you can say, well, I know a bunch, and none of them are like that. In my experience, none of them are like that, right? At least in amongst those that I know. And of course, people do exist of all faiths and all traditions that do heinous things or whatever, but having some context and some concrete experience to locate that context and to speak from, right, a position of real life knowledge, I think can help. The academic piece is there. I mean, obviously I teach courses on Islam, and I think that's important, maybe just to keep myself employed, but but I think, yeah, combating ignorance directly at every level, right? And then even in the media that's occurring, to address that. So, you know, to write to those news outlets and to post links to more, you know, informative and informed articles is important. I don't know. It's tough for me. I've engaged in kind of the Twitterverse and Instagram and Facebook debates over the years, and I don't do that much anymore. But I'm glad when people do it and do it well. I don't know that I'm the person for that. So I think combating those things when they occur is great. But often just, you know, changing the lives of individual people and their approaches often can cultivate that change overall. When you have a critical mass that knows better and knows more and is pushing back, I think that's important. So yeah, know your stuff, speak out against ignorance, speak up often. Cool.
And I'd like to direct the same question to Dr. Naveen. On an education level, how have you found any difficulties, you know, talking about topics as that? Have you gone into any backlash, any resistance?
So I teach mostly at UC Irvine. I'm an adjunct professor of consumer behavior and marketing. And I remember immediately following, when I graduated and got my PhD, and I started my first class at UC Irvine, there was no rate your professor on me, right? I was an unknown person. And everyone walked in, you know, they don't know who I am. And so I walked into the lecture hall, and the hall was full, and I made my way up. And I can see everyone's face kind of drop, like they had this like, oh my God, who is this who's going to be, you know, teaching this entire quarter? And it was interesting because the moment I opened my mouth and they realized that I was not fresh off some boat, they were like, okay, this might be okay. And it takes talking, and it takes not necessarily, you know, in class, I don't like to be the, you know, I'm the token Muslim, let me preach from my pulpit here. I like, you know, and I teach my children this, I like to lead by example. And so, just like they were saying, if you meet a Muslim, that person might change your opinion. And so I have, you know, basically an audience of 80 that I can control for an entire quarter. And if I present myself appropriately, if I provide a good example of someone who does wear the veil on a regular basis, of course, then, you know, I do have students that will come up and ask me, I don't mean to be rude, but can I ask you a question? And I welcome those questions. But I think, you know, in addition to what everyone is saying, we can't just put the onus on others to come and ask or to come and get educated. You know, it's lovely if you do, because I think, you know, as human beings, we need to, you know, engage with others and learn about people, learn about different cultures, because we do live in such a global world now. But the onus is also on Muslims to educate, everyone else, quite frankly. We've been, as a community, we've been in such a bubble for so long. You worry about what everyone's going to say about you. Let's just, walk by the side of the wall and not make eye contact because, God forbid, someone's going to get the wrong idea about us. And that's not the correct position to take. Muslims are God-fearing, peaceful people, and the word Islam itself in Arabic means peace. So we really should have nothing to fear in speaking out and educating others about our religion. So what, for instance, this particular mosque does, just one of many mosques, but what we've done over the past couple of years is hold events where we invite people from the interfaith community, our neighbors, members of the local churches, the local synagogues, the Sikh temples and so forth, to come and engage with us, and we learn about each other. And in dialoguing with one another, we learn and we grow and we break those stereotypes and so forth. So I think more of that is needed. We, in fact, after the shootings up in Philadelphia, we had a kind of just a prayer for healing, we called it. And we got members of our local synagogue together with the Muslims, and we had a few of our Christian neighbors as well. And we just had an evening where we commemorated those that passed away. And it meant so much to that local, it's a very traditional, and I can't recall what their denomination is, but it's a very traditional Jewish community. It's a temple out in Ontario, and they in turn invited us, and we went to them and we talked about Islam to their congregation, and we learned from each other. So definitely don't feel shy about asking a Muslim, and be very, be frank about your questions. There's a lot out there in the media, so many misconceptions. So don't be afraid to ask. But also, it is our responsibility, we have to put some of the responsibility on us, is to come out and also talk to you and hopefully grow that way.
According to the study of the Public Religion Research Institute, 62% of Americans have never conversed with a Muslim, 57% say they know little, and 26% say they know nothing about Islam. Since 2016, campaign season began, candidate and now President Donald Trump has stoked Islamophobia by both words and action. Interviews where he says Islam hates us, retweets of anti-Muslim videos from ultra-nationalist Britain First Group, policies such as the Muslim ban, and restricting refugee resettlement. How do we address Islamophobia within our own culture? It is an open question. Anybody can respond. I believe, Masood, we haven't heard a word from you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Masood Khan. I think a lot of it was actually answered in the last question in terms of educating people. Politics is dirty business, unfortunately. And, in order to get votes, people like to scare populations. And the easiest way to get people to do things is to scare them, right? When your livelihood and your safety and your security is threatened, you can get people to do a lot of things. And history tells us that that's happened in numerous times, over and over again. And this is no different. Human psychology doesn't change over the millennia, right? People respond to fear. And if anything, politicians are geniuses at getting people to feel a certain way. And so if you can get people to fear a group of people, so they'll vote for you, that's what works. I mean, just recently I was listening to the news when it came to the border issue. So it seemed like things were stalling. So what did I hear tweeted about was there was somebody who saw a prayer rug at the border, in one of the borders. They found a prayer rug there, right? So what is that saying? Oh, well, it's not just people from Mexico coming, it's Muslims are coming now too. Right? We don't know what they're doing. They might be coming over and doing all kinds of nefarious things. So how do we address those things? I think a lot of it has already been talked about. It's maybe even taking, or doing your part in calling those politicians out, sending them an email, writing a letter, you know, or tweeting back, maybe even. Maybe you'll be unfriended or something, I don't know, but that happens, I guess, too, if you oppose certain politicians. But you know, I think it's about education, and I actually teach as well. I teach at Cal State LA part-time, and one of the things that I tell my students is to use your critical thinking skills, right? So critical thinking skills meaning to think about what's being said, to analyze it, to critique it, and not just accept it at face value, right? I mean, it's just like anything else. If you watch a TV commercial and they're trying to sell you a car, and somebody tells you this is the best car in the world, you're not going to just believe it. You're going to be like, well, why is it the best car in the world? What's so great about it, right? There's certain things that are going to run through your head. Similarly, when you hear a politician say something, you're going to want to use your critical thinking skills and think about why is he saying this, and what's the motivating factors behind it. Is it true? Is he just saying it to get votes, right? And so it requires people, and in a vibrant democracy, it requires people to be thinking people, to be thinking for themselves, and that's one of the hallmarks of our society, right? Is that people think for themselves and they're able to vote, cast their vote in a way that reflects their thinking. Unfortunately, you know, there is a lot of stereotypes and whatnot. So, but I don't want to reiterate what people have already said. So.
Thank you. And have you guys personally faced any criticism, stereotypes, blatantly in public? Anybody can answer this. Could you guys give us a little personal experience?
So, I've been very fortunate. I was raised in San Francisco. I was raised by parents who immigrated here from Egypt, and were very proud of the fact that they were Muslim, but they were very proud also of the fact that they were Egyptian. And so they raised us with this mentality of, you know, you are lucky to have this bicultural experience, and you should be happy that you're a Muslim, and you should have nothing to fear, and be very proud of yourself. And so I actually went to Catholic schools, and I was raised in San Francisco, and I grew up with a sense of this internal confidence that was great. I made a personal choice at one point in my life to wear the hijab, always. Only when I'm outside, by the way. I don't wear it when I'm inside the house, in my own home, but because I get asked that question. But I made the choice to wear it, and always felt very confident. I am an American, and I have the freedom to dress as I choose and practice my religion the way I choose, and I do that proudly. So I've never really been, no one's ever blatantly in my face said anything negative to me. But unfortunately, after the San Bernardino shootings, you know, for one thing, as Muslims, there are these bad apples that call themselves Muslims that are really not Muslims, because in killing others, that is not an Islamic act. And so they call themselves Muslims, and I feel personally that they are hijacking the name of Islam. And so it makes me very angry as someone who has their faith belied in this way. But that said, there are bad people out there that do call themselves Muslims, and they're doing some very horrendous, heinous things to others. So the minute we hear about any shooting, any kind of killings, anything happening, any bombs going off somewhere in a remote part of the world, the first thing that comes to a Muslim's mind is, oh my God, I hope it's not a Muslim that did this. That's the first thing you think of. And you get this feeling in the pit of your stomach like, oh gosh, God, you know. So when the shootings happened at the synagogue, that was the first thing that went through my mind. Gosh, I hope it's not a Muslim. And when they said it, when they mentioned that it was just some, you know, guy, they didn't say Muslim. The first thing they would have said was, it's a Muslim. When they don't mention that it's a Muslim, you know it's not a Muslim. And so I was like, phew, not a Muslim, good, we're good to go. They never really mentioned the guy's name. You heard his name like fleetingly, and then it was, you know, poor guy has some mental illnesses, he had a horrendous childhood. There was always an excuse for it. But if it was a Muslim, it would have been, he's a Muslim. We still don't know what the religion of this guy was, but that's a side note. So when San Bernardino happened several years ago, it was a pretty bad thing. And I was in the parking lot one day driving, and I had my kids in the car with me, and this teenager, he was a teenager, he was my kid's age. He put down his window and he called me a towel head. I think that's what he said. I felt that I had been like attacked, like physically attacked. It was, you would think, I mean, my son, who was at the time, some, silly preteen, starts laughing, hysterically. And I looked at him and I was crying because I felt that someone had attacked me. I mean, he might as well have raped me, to be quite honest, because that's how deeply I felt it, and it had nothing to do with me. He doesn't know me. He just saw this piece of fabric on my head. So yeah, that was the only time. I'm very fortunate, but it was, I feel for people that are attacked on a regular basis. But that's just long story to a short question.
Just to mention, the sisters, like Sister Naveen, those who choose to wear the scarf, they tend to receive more of the Islamophobic, experiences, we truly appreciate, them going out and they represent Islam. When you see someone like Sister Naveen, right away, she's a Muslim. So when they go out, they do quite a bit representing Islam, and we just wanted to say we appreciate you guys. In regards to experiencing an Islamophobic incident, I been pretty minimal, but I do remember one specific incident recently where I was at the gym, just lifting some weights, and this guy comes by next to two other guys that were lifting also and says, "Hey man, you know what Muslims are?" And those guys were just lifting weights. I mean, they didn't care to talk about anything, but they were like, no, what are they? And he says, they're murderers, rapists, and what do you say, like thugs or something. It was a bad description. And he's going off just saying every disgusting thing you can think of about Muslims. And I'm there, and I kind of just drop my weights, and I'm looking at this guy, just, trying to listen to him. And I'm waiting to interject and find the right moment to kind of come into the conversation, and he just keeps going for a good maybe 2-3 minutes. It's at 5 minutes now, and then I said, okay, this is enough, and I had to politely say, hey, by the way, where did you get your information on Islam or Muslims? Because whatever you're saying to these young guys here is not correct. He goes, oh, well, I saw it on a documentary. Oh, really? Which documentary was that? I don't know, I saw it on a documentary. And he just walked away. He didn't want to talk to me. So what I did was I just talked to the two young fellows that were there, and I told them, hey, you probably shouldn't believe what this guy was saying. I'm a Muslim, and I can tell you nothing of what he said was true. And, I gave him just a quick intro on Islam, and advised them to always verify information. Not that they believed whatever he was saying. And that's actually something I would tell everyone here too, is that if anyone brings you any type of information, like Masood mentioned, critically think, verify it. That's actually one of the teachings in Islam, even for Muslims. If someone comes to you with news, verify it before spreading it, so that if it comes out to be false, you don't end up regretting it and be sorry for what you just spread. How many times can we remember a time where someone passed on some news and we forwarded it on social media or Twitter or Facebook, and they're like, oh shoot, that was false, and we're, oh sorry, that wasn't true. So the same way with the media, our moderator mentioned, 60 to 80% of what's on there is Islamophobia, or it's a negative depiction of Islam. So just verify it, through Muslim sources, of course, first, and then even on your own, if you don't have that time, go to Muslim sources, Muslim websites, and try to find out, correct information. Do you guys have anything to share in regards to Islamophobic incidents?
Be here all night.
Okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and move it. So this is a little bit wordy, a little long, and a little sensitive. So how do we discuss topics in public space, such as the boarding schools camps that are happening in China that are currently housing about 1.5 million Muslims, and the Myanmar Rohingya conflict that displaced 700,000 Muslims, 7,600 died, 750 of those including kids. So how do we bring that to a public forum without people being sensitive or just not wanting to hear it?
And you're referring to the
No,
Uyghurs?
the
Yeah.
Rohingya.
Both incidents,
both.
yeah.
Uyghurs
Okay.
and the
And the
Rohingyas.
Rohingyas. Okay. Did you want?
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I was ignorant and not knowing anything about the Uyghurs, who are a Muslim Chinese. Well, I always thought they were Chinese Muslims, is what I thought. Turns out they're not. We went to dinner. We were invited to dinner at some people my husband works with. My husband's a physician, and this nurse and her husband wanted to have us over for dinner. They were Muslim. They're Muslim, and it was Ramadan, and they invited us over to break fast with them. We went to their house, a lovely couple. We sat and talked. They looked like they were a mix of, like a Caucasian and, an Asian married and had kids. You know what the kids look like? They look a little, Caucasian, a little Asian. And that's what they looked like. And I couldn't really place where they were from. And they had some other friends over, and, they looked kind of the same. And we started talking, and it turns out they were Uyghurs. And I guess their ethnic background, is somewhere from Northern Asia, so kind of Turkmenistan and Turkish, and I mean, it's a big mix. And they're a group that's settled in a particular region in China, and now the Chinese government is, for all intents and purposes, putting them in this ghetto type of a situation, just like the Nazis did, and they're in these concentration camps now. They can't leave the country. If there are Uyghurs here in the US, they are not allowed to go back to China to visit family. It's a particularly devastating situation they're in. So they sat and explained all this to us and educated my husband and I. And they do have, they try to have these rallies, and they try to go and protest in front of the Chinese embassy, and they try to go to Washington and make their case, but they're not being heard because it's politically not advantageous to different countries, such as the US, to interject on their behalf with the Chinese government. So, as a country here in the US, we don't do anything about it. So it's a pretty sad situation. Again, I think more should be done to educate the world about their plight. But unfortunately, there's a lot of politics that goes into it. And I'm not as versed with the Rohingyas, but it's a very similar situation where, they're poor people that have nowhere to go, and they were pushed out by one country and refused entry by another country. And it's just sad politics. I don't know if you're aware of this, Masood.
Yeah, some of the politics surrounding both in China and in Bangladesh and in Burma, so Burma is where the Rohingya population is. These are people who are, they have kind of a distinct ethnic background that live in Burma. The Burmese government had basically isolated them and massacred thousands and thousands of them. And in China, they had rounded up this particular group of ethnic Muslim Uyghur, known as the Uyghurs. So the interesting thing is the rhetoric that's used to justify these actions were very similar to the Islamophobic type of rhetoric that we hear in our own country, and of course from the type of people who committed the massacre in New Zealand. These people are dangerous, we should be afraid of them, they should be expelled, et cetera, to the point where these people are not considered, and particularly in the Rohingya, completely dehumanized, right? Not seen as humans, so that babies, women, children massacred, right, in broad daylight by soldiers. And this is another religious group that initiated this this massacre, and particularly in Burma. It was a Buddhist priest who is an extremist in, you know, in his own right. So just to kind of also point out the fact that extremism, you know, exists in all forms and shapes and religions. It's not unique to any particular group of people. So I think a lot of it has to do with just understanding the politics of the place. And interestingly enough, that some of those politics overlap with our some of our own politics. So it's important to be aware of those things.
Yeah, and I won't say too much about those particular cases, but some of you are from one of the courses I teach, which is the Holocaust course, and we're right in the section of kind of the rise of the National Socialist Party in Nazi Germany, and students are already seeing the writing on the wall, like, oh wow, we see this, you know, some of this rhetoric here. We see it in the ethno-nationalism in Western and Eastern Europe. We see it in the religious ethno-nationalism in Burma and elsewhere, and we haven't made those connections yet. But I mean, I haven't spoken of them, but students have started to ask, is this kind of like what's going on here? And I'm like, well, yeah. And so I think being able to talk about these things are important and connect them with their history. And when we see any group of people, right, who are defining what it means to be a part of a region or a part of a country, and that usually breaks down along ethnic and religious and other lines, be aware of that and realize this isn't a, you know, a new game. This has been played since, you know, the history of civilization, and yeah, and we need to combat that. And you said, starting here, right? When you hear that rhetoric of defining, whether it's Trump or whomever, defining Americans, you know, by ethnicity, by national origin, even prior to coming to America, by religion, that, you know, that has some really dark roots, and we see the writing on the wall, right? I think everybody should see that. I'm surprised at how many don't, right? You said some people just, you know, buy into it, especially if they are in the alleged, you know, majority or privileged group. And so I think people within an ethno-nationalist identity that is the majority group need to especially be vigilant in calling out others, right? So if you're a white Christian American, I think you have the lion's share of the duty here to call that out and say, I will not be identified with this group of people and define Americanism by ethno-nationalism. But to be clear, it's on the rise. I mean, I was just talking about statistics in a panel we did a couple weeks ago. But several of the international groups that track ethno-nationalist hate groups have said, you know, in the last several years we're seeing a double to triple increase, really in the last maybe 8 years. And you see this again. A few years ago I was talking about it in Eastern Europe, and then now Western Europe's kind of coming along for the ride, and we're seeing some of these things in America. So, you know, just be wary, you know, call it out, be vigilant when you see it. And again, it's not just in South Asia or Southeast Asia. We see it in many parts of the Western world. So. Sorry to be a downer.
And the next question, the last question out of the 6 questions I have, is more about the community within the Islamic faith. What stance does Islam take on same-sex relations, and how are those particular people treated within the community?
So in regards to same-sex relationships, Islam pretty much holds the same view as the other major world religions like Judaism and Christianity, where the act itself is not condoned. You know, we do believe marriage is between a man and a woman, but at the same time, everyone is treated with respect and, you know, and equality. So just because someone happens to be gay or lesbian, that does not mean they are not allowed into the place of worship, like the masjid. Doesn't mean they're not allowed to attend community events and so forth. At the end of the day, you know, technically speaking, it's a sin they're committing, but everyone sins, right? You know, we all sin in different ways, and so, you know, we don't just isolate those type of people from the community just because they choose to practice something. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's not something we condone, but we do not dismiss this group of people from the community. We still have to treat them equally and respect, and they're invited to come and pray and join us for dinners and so forth, whatever the case is, just like everybody else. There's no distinction there between someone who's, you know, from the LGBTQ community or not. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And then one more question. Talking to my friend of 7 years from Qatar, I've realized, and her explaining to me that when she was younger, her faith and practice within the Islamic faith, it was changed and shaped when she was younger versus when she was older. Could one of you guys, or any of you guys, would like to explain your personal journey with the faith and how it's kind of shaped your view when you were younger to where you are now?
Big question.
I guess since I'm the youngest one.
Thanks.
So again, I mean, personal journey-wise, so, just like you mentioned about Islamophobia, I've never really got hit with any Islamophobic remarks. I was born and raised in Rancho Cucamonga, 28 years, 2 miles from here. Right? I've been going here my entire life. So for the most part, honestly, I've been blessed to be in the company of individuals who kind of judged me and saw me for who I was. Again, my name is Nadim. So usually when I would go to school, they automatically assumed I was a girl because they thought I was Nadine. So when I'd raise my hand, they'd kind of laugh for a little bit. I was like, no, that's really my name. So my own personal journey, honestly, and I feel like this is probably a common theme with a lot of American Muslims, is it's a balance of creating your own identity as an American, while at the same time understanding that you have your own unique religion, right? The media, some way, in some form, always tries to make it like you can't be both in one, but honestly, I feel like I've lived as American as possible, but at the same time, my parents gave me the flexibility to learn my faith out of a desire, not as out of an obligation, right? Where just like any faith, it's not forced upon you. Islam is something I feel like at a younger age, we learn it, but as you grow older, you learn to love it because of the way you're able to live it. So again, my personal journey was pretty chill and no complaints, and I had a good time doing that.
I had a little unique journey. So my parents actually put me in Catholic school for a couple of years. So 5th grade and 6th grade, I was in Catholic school, and I attended Friday Mass every Friday. It was a very unique experience. And some of you may be asking, why did they do that? They actually wanted me to learn about other religions, and they had no problem with the school because it was a very good private school, and they had no problem with me learning about a different religion. So I went ahead and, I went to the school for a couple of years and learned a lot about the Catholic faith. Although I didn't embrace it, but I was basically spending my majority of my time with Catholic folks for a couple of years. Going on to high school, and this is really the reality of many people here, by the way, especially the generation I came from. A lot of Muslims migrated here not to spread Islam or teach Islam to America, but rather they came here to either they were escaping some persecution back home, or they came to make some Benjamins. They came to make money. And so, my parents were really occupied doing their work. Both of them worked. Me and my sister were home alone. And, we didn't really practice Islam much. And it got to a point in high school where, my parents don't know this, but if someone asked me, are you a Muslim? I would say no. I would just say, oh no, I don't, I'm not a Muslim, but I believe in God, but I don't have a religion. Kind of agnostic, you could say. And then, towards college, actually, believe it or not, I was around some nice people, and one day I listened to the recitation of the Quran, and it touched my heart, and I wanted to learn more, and I realized I was missing out on a lot, and I didn't really know much about my religion, or at least as much as I should have, and that caused me to learn about it more. And then I took a trip over to Mecca and Medina, the two most sacred places of Islam, and I came back, a refreshed person, and I wanted to pray 5 times a day. And in fact, I still remember till today, our family wasn't practicing at the time at all. We were all just sitting watching TV one day, watching a movie, and I get up from the movie and I go over to the living room and I decide to pray. And everyone got up and they were like, what is he doing? Like, it's tripping, and And they all started laughing and smiling, like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, oh, I'm praying, I'm supposed to pray. And then that just became a habit, and I started doing it 5 times a day. And believe it or not, now my whole family prays 5 times a day, and they're all practicing. So it was a journey not just for me, but for my whole family. And I was blessed to learn about different faiths growing up. I had a lot of friends that were diverse in school, not just the Catholic school that I went to for 2 years, but even the schools I was in Hollywood and Los Angeles and Chino Hills and so forth, and college, whatever. I was able to meet a lot of people and learn about different faiths. But at the end of the day, yeah, it led me all back, to Islam. So that's just a quick summary of.
So to touch up, you said that you would go to school, and when they would ask you, you wouldn't honestly respond to your faith. Did you ever have an inner conflict with the ideals at school and your ideals at home? And how did you resolve that?
Yeah, you all went to high school. I'm sure some of you just came out of it. There's a lot of peer pressure in high school, right? Everyone tries to be cool. Everyone wants to fit in with a certain crowd. You want to avoid a certain crowd. And, unfortunately, like I mentioned, my parents were so busy at the time. God bless them. Without them, I would not be able to be where I am today. But at the same time, they didn't have the time to really teach Islam and go over these things just because they were working so hard. But so I was pretty much just left with whatever I saw in school, and it was tough because obviously, kids don't know much. They try to teach you about the world and relationships and how you should be, and they really have a very narrow mind of thinking when it comes to that. So I pretty much just fell into the pressures of the surroundings I was in, and kind of was in a, I guess you could call, identity crisis. I didn't really know, just try to fit in, wear certain types of clothes, comb my hair a certain way, whatever, just to fit into a certain crowd. So it was tough, going to school and then going home. My parents didn't really understand. They both grew up in India, so they didn't really understand the struggles and the pressures that you and I would face in high school here. So it was a tough time growing up, but I know now I could relate to the young guys and girls in school now, and I could share my experiences, and I'll have a lot to help them with, and also the parents too, to let them realize, hey, look, there's a whole nother world going on there that you don't know about, and you should know about. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
Thank you. I'd like to thank both of you guys for opening up about your personal life. I think it's very important that we become very interpersonal with one another and create these discussions, have a little laughter. At that point, we tend to humanize one another. So we're going to go ahead and open the floor for anybody who has a question. Anybody would like to ask something on their mind, something we didn't cover, something you would like to be explained a bit more?
Hate is hate, and ugliness is ugliness, regardless of what it's directed at. And we, in moments where we're taken aback by an incident like that, by any incident of hate, you'll react naturally, and what comes automatically to you, and what will come, organically to you. And so you did what you felt was right at the time, and that's always the most helpful thing, is to feel, I would imagine if I was in that situation, I would just want to feel protected by those that were with me, that were safe people for me, and so I think you did beautifully by protecting her that way, so thank you. I actually had a funny story. So I have 5 kids. I have twins, and then I have 3 others. I always feel I must clarify to people that I wasn't pregnant 5 times. I was pregnant only 4 times, because it's going to make a big difference, right? But anyway, I was delivering I think it was my third kid. And by then, I had decided, when I was pregnant with her, I decided to wear the hijab full time. And so, she took her time making her appearance in the world. And, the doctor had to come in, give me an epidural. No, I don't want to take any drugs. No, you need the epidural. Let's move things along, that type of a thing. And so I was wearing just a loose, my hijab loosely like you, and it kind of slipped off my head. And so my husband was with me, and he's starting to tug at it, and I'm like, leave me alone, this is not the time. And I'm angry with him because he got me in this position, right? But my doctor was just the sweetest lady. She just gently, adjusted it for me, and it felt so comforting. Not that I didn't appreciate my husband, but he irritated me at that point, just don't get me wrong. But it was just comforting to know that someone who I trusted had my back in that sense, if you will. So thank you for what you did to your friend. It's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very brave. I would, just from a security perspective, and maybe some pepper spray, just carry it. If someone does something to see it,
I'm just curious, what changed in your life that made you want to wear that?
So in Islam, the Quran teaches us that out of modesty and so forth, that a woman should be covered. And Islamically, the covering should be you're covered to your wrists, your head is covered, and you're covered down to your ankles. Okay. So those are the parameters, and the way people choose to dress has to do with culture at that point. So if you go to Afghanistan, you'll see women dressed one way. If you go to Brazil, people will be dressed a different way. So as long as you follow the parameters, you can dress in any way you want. The idea is modesty. It's connecting with your Creator. In many ways, it's also a visible sign that you are a Muslim. But it's your personal journey, really. So even though the Quran says, women should do this, it is never forced upon you, okay? It should not be forced upon you. So Islamically, it should not be forced. It is a choice. Obviously, there will be, you go to different societies and you will see that, different societies there might be those that are more paternalistic and they'll enforce it, but that is not an Islamic teaching, okay? Islamic teaching is you do it, a woman chooses when she does it. So I was brought up, like I said, in San Francisco, went to Catholic schools. My children, my two youngest attended Catholic school as well. So I love going back and attending Mass with them and, saying the prayers because it brings back such fun, I had happy memories in Catholic school. But unlike Sahib, my father in particular was very involved in my education. So he never really got involved with the academics, but he did review theology with me. So I would come home and he'd ask me, so what did you learn in theology today? And I'd give him what I'd learned, and then he would give me the Islamic equivalent to that. And so I grew up learning both traditions and being well versed in both of them. So I felt very secure in who I was. I never felt conflicted. I was very blessed in that sense. Because of that, I never felt I needed to wear it, quite honestly. I had my relationship with my Creator. I prayed, I fasted, I did all of the requirements of Islam. But I didn't feel the need to cover my hair. I was also quite conservative because I was taught that at a young age not to wear anything revealing and so forth. So I never really wore anything revealing, and I felt, if I'm wearing, 3/4 sleeve, does it really matter that I, extend my sleeve to my wrist, for instance? But it's funny that as you mature as an individual, you go through a personal journey of life, and you grow, you learn, you reflect more, and I just, I just started thinking about it more and more, and thinking, well, when standing in prayer, we have to be covered this way. So our wrists have to be covered, our hair has to be covered, and up to our ankles covered. So my rationale, as I got older was, well, if I'm standing in front of God dressed this way, should I not stand in front of my fellow man dressed in this way? And that was, for me, what really sold me on it, if you will, that I had to, I had to please God, and it felt comforting to me to do that. I had my husband's support. I mean, it's difficult also for husbands, because I remember he was very supportive, but when we went out in public for the first time, I could see that he was a little unsure. And when I asked him, he said, well, I was used to my pretty wife walking next to me, and it's not that you're not pretty, but you look different now. And it's true, you are different. But that was, I felt was the right thing for me. So I have 5 kids. I have 2 daughters. One chose on her own to wear the hijab, and this was following the San Bernardino shootings. And she did it mostly because she wanted to be a visible Muslim, if you will. My other daughter chooses not to wear it, and that's her personal choice, and that's her personal journey, and we're fine with that. But yeah, there are times, don't get me wrong, you'll get dressed and you're standing in front of the mirror and you're like, great outfit, and it goes really good with the hair, and then you have to cover your hair. It's like, so yeah, I mean, it's definitely an internal struggle at times, but I think it's part of our struggle. We struggle with anything as a human being, and so it's been interesting. It's been interesting. Yeah, it'll be 22 years actually in a couple of weeks, so it's been a while. Yeah. And I'm sorry, you had a question. You've been very patient.
So actually that was my question,
okay.
but brought up something else. So as far as modesty goes, is there any standards that you would say pertain specifically to men of the religion, or is that more specifically, towards
the men? Definitely.
women?
Go for it.
Yeah, no, modesty goes both ways. So, you can't have your wife walking in a hijab and your guys in short shorts and, a tank top. But for the men, so they should have actually what's considered the aura. They should have everything covered up to their knees, and everything above their navel. That doesn't mean they can walk without a shirt and and shorts. The modesty is highly encouraged. So, and on top of that, none of their clothing should be revealing where it's showing, the shape of their body and so forth. So there's modesty when it comes to men's clothing as well. It's not the same as women. As she mentioned, the women cover all the way up to the wrist, their hair, and all the way down to their ankles. Men are not required to obviously cover their hair or even up to their wrist and ankles. But nonetheless, whatever clothes they're wearing should be modest. Shouldn't be in a way that's revealing parts of their body, and especially the private area and so forth. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You are free to practice your religion in any way you see fit. So absolutely. I actually have I have friends who chose to remove the hijab. Some of them chose to remove it after 9/11, actually, and it was because out of fear. They were afraid of being, targeted. So they chose to remove it. I have other friends that once they hit 50, they said, that's it, I'm taking it off. It's a personal journey, and you can't really speak to anyone. I know very, very old women that still wear it because that's how they're comfortable. And so it's I mean, in the religion it says that once you reach a certain age where you know, I think the understanding is, quote unquote, you're no longer desirable. There will no longer be lust when men look at you, that you can remove it. And I know women that are quite old and, you know, very like quite decrepit actually at this point, you know, but they choose to still wear it because that gives them a certain sense of comfort and connection with God. So but it's freedom, complete freedom, because at the end of the day, we will each be asked about our actions. And no, you know, I can't control my daughter's actions, for instance, and I will not be asked for her actions. And likewise, you know, my husband can't dictate to me what to do. We will each be asked. We encourage each other, definitely, and we give each other support and try to, you know, help each other be the best Muslims we can. But at the end of the day, it's freedom of choice, definitely. Yeah, you're welcome.
Just to add on to that, there's just one concept I would like to share, and it relates to the last few questions that were asked. But so in Islam, there is no compulsion in religion, like Sister Naveen mentioned. But also, there's something I wanted to share. Going back to the Prophet Muhammad, remember this is where, you know, the Prophet who received the revelation of the Quran and so forth, and Islam. During his time, the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. But when the Quran was revealed, remember, it just didn't come down as one book. It was over this 23-year period. And the first 13 years were simply talking about the power of God, you know, how God is watching over you. You should worship Him alone. There was a lot of idolatry and so forth. Then towards the last 10 years of his mission, we got a lot of the jurisprudence, right? We got not to drink alcohol and not to commit fornication and so forth. All these things came later. In fact, when the verse of not drinking alcohol was revealed, this was several years after the first revelation, at least 13 years after, his companions were actually sitting in a bar. The Prophet Muhammad's companions were sitting in a bar having alcohol, and the verse was revealed not to drink. But at that point, their faith was so strong that when that verse was revealed, it was noted that alcohol flooded the streets of Medina, meaning they gave it up right away. But they were at a point of such spiritual strength that they were willing to do whatever was revealed and do it right away. But that took time. And you know, and this journey takes time for every single person. It's not practical that you give someone, you know, all of Islam in one book or one meeting and say, you got to do this, starting now. That's not going to happen. It is a journey, and it's a journey for every single person. Some will do it sooner, some will do it later. But, you know, if anyone ever tells you that, you know, you need to do it right away, they don't really even understand how this religion even came to fruition and how it initially even started from the people where, you know, it basically originated from. So just thought I'd share that. Yeah.
So I just wanted to add something, because there's a lot of discussion about the clothing and things like that, and, you know, the rules that Muslims follow. And I think that's probably the most obvious thing that people look to is the way people dress, the way the beards, the way they look, you know, what they eat, what they can't eat. You know, there's a lot of rules that kind of people think of when they think of about Muslims. But there's also another aspect of Muslim religious practice. It's a very spiritual practice as well that probably doesn't get mentioned a lot. Not only not in the media, not unless you really meet and spend time with Muslims. You know, there's an emphasis on things like controlling anger, for example, controlling envy, controlling hatred. And part of our discipline of fasting is to address those real inner, deeper, kind of baser aspects of human character, to try to perfect that. And that's a lifelong struggle. And in fact, those aspects of one's struggle are considered better and more rewarding to overcome the struggles than even some of the outward things that people think are, you know, kind of think of in terms of religiosity: the beard, the clothing, the hair covering, right? I mean, you can grow the longest beard and cover your hair all you want, but if you're, you know, if you have anger and envy and rage in your heart, those things are kind of irrelevant. And actually, those are the true aspects of some of our teachings, which unfortunately don't really get covered a lot. But I wanted to mention that because it's kind of something that sorry, I think you had it.
So just a heads up, we are running a bit out of time. After the last question was supposed to be the last question, we are going to take a tour. But if you guys could answer
Sure.
efficiently and quickly, that'd be much appreciated.
Right. So I mean, you know, it goes back to being knowledgeable and educated about the religion. Unfortunately, they were misinformed, you know, through some wrong source. And although they, you know, claim to be Muslims, they're obviously misinformed. They were not, you know, well informed about the religion of Islam. And there's a lot of bad information out there, especially YouTube, you know, the Google, the media, you name it, where there's a lot of propaganda and misinformation by people sometimes that claim to be Muslims, but you know, they're spreading a lot of wrong information. Unfortunately, you know, there's individuals that catch on to this and they do what they do, you know, and they still claim to be Muslim, unfortunately, but that doesn't you know, mean it's condoned by the religion. As Muslims, we all will make mistakes. Obviously, hopefully, nothing, you know, like that, like a heinous crime. But we don't do it in the name of Islam by any means. So, in short, I would say, you know, they were misinformed, obviously, and you know, it's just a very unfortunate situation. So, you know, we as Muslims, not only do we have a duty to explain Islam to the non-Muslim community, but actually an even bigger task sometimes is to explain it to the Muslim community, you know, to make sure they are well informed about the right teachings of Islam, and they stay connected to the masajid, the mosque, and Islamic environments where they can get the proper information.
So just real quick, one of the things about people who've been radicalized that you mentioned, often those people are not people who come regularly to the mosque. And they've done studies, these are people kind of off on their own. They're, you know, sitting in front of the YouTube watching stuff that kind of brainwashes them into a certain particular. But these are people who are typically not connected to a larger community. They're a little bit, you know, probably a little bit of derangement there as well, you know, psychiatric or psychological issues. So.
I would like to thank and conclude the Muslim media of this year's event. Right now, they are going to start their prayers. I encourage everybody to go in the back, stand, and just stay kind of absorbed and, you know, really immerse yourself in this, you know, faith, and really just kind of take into account what they really desire and, you know, what they're praying for. So thank you, and I would like to thank everybody for coming out. It was a bigger turnout than the previous years. Really engaging, and thank you so much.
So just to summarize what we're going to do now, so we're going to have a call to prayer first. Every prayer has a call before. And then right after that, we're going to actually stand up and perform the actual prayer. So maybe about 5 or 10 minutes. And then after that, we're going to do the tour, Sister Naveen? Or? Yeah? So we'll do the tour right after the prayer. Thank you so much. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. As for a translation of the call to prayer, basically what we said was, God is the greatest, God is the greatest. There's no one worthy of worship but Him. And I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Come to prayer, come to prayer, come to success, come to success. God is the greatest, and there is no one worthy of worship but Him. And now we'll have the second part of the call.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Set up shoulder to shoulder from the gaps. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. وإذا سمعوا ما أنزل إلى الرسول أعينهم تفيض من الدمع مما عرفوا من الحق يقولون ربنا آمنا فاكتبنا مع الشاهدين وما لنا لا نؤمن بالله وما جاءنا من الحق ونطمع أن يدخلنا ربنا مع القوم الصالحين فأثابهم الله بما قالوا جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها وذلك جزاء المحسنين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. التحيات لله والصلوات. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر الله. اللهم انت السلام منك السلام اللهم اني اعوذ بك من شر. So that concluded the obligatory part of our sunset prayer. After this, you may see people rising and offering some additional prayers, which are the voluntary prayers that you can offer after typically every prayer, with the exception of a couple. And then right after that, I guess we'll head out to the multi-purpose hall and we'll start our tour. So maybe a couple more minutes.